Wanderer of the Wasteland by Zane Grey, Chapter 27, Part 3. Next morning, when Adam returned from a look around, he discovered Jeannie up and puttering at the campfire. She greeted him with undue cheerfulness. She was making an heroic effort to show that this situation was perfectly natural, and she did pretty well. But Adam's keen eyes and sense gathered that Jeannie felt herself on the verge of a great and tremendous event. After breakfast, Adam asked Jeannie to accompany him to the farmhouse. She went, but the free, lithe step wanted something of its old grace. Adam espied the children in the yard, and now he took cognizance of them. Tommy was a ragged, tousle-headed, chubby little rascal, ruddy-cheeked and blue-eyed. Betty resembled the lad Eugene, having his fine dark eyes and open countenance. Hal was the largest, a red-headed, freckle-faced imp, if Adam ever saw one. They regarded the newcomers with considerable interest. Jeannie approached them and offered to swing Betty, who was sitting in a clumsy little hammock-like affair made of barrel staves. And Adam, seeing the children's mother at the door, went that way. "Good morning, Mrs. Blair," he said. "We've come over to chat a bit and see your youngsters." She greeted them smilingly and came out wiping her hands on her apron. "Goodness knows we're glad to have you. Jean has gone to work. Won't you sit on the bench here?" Then she espied Jeannie. "For land's sake, that your girl in the boys' clothes?" "Jean told me what a dunce he'd been. Oh, she's pretty. What shiny hair." "That's Jeannie. I want you to meet her, and then, Mrs. Blair, perhaps you can give an old desert codger a little advice," said Adam. He called Jeannie, and she came readily, though not without shyness. Despite her garb and its rents, Adam could not but feel proud of her. Mrs. Blair's kindness quickly put the girl at ease, and after a little talk, in which Jeannie's part augured well for the impression she was to make upon people, Adam bade her play with the children. "No wonder Jean spilled the milk," ejaculated Miss Blair. "Why?" queried Adam. "That girl's more than pretty. Never saw such hair. And her eyes, they're not the color of hair and eyes I know." "That's the desert's work, Mrs. Blair. On the desert, nature makes color, as well as life, more vivid, more intense." "And this Jeannie, isn't it odd? Her name is like my boy Jean's. She's no relation of yours?" Briefly, then, Adam related Jeannie's story and the circumstances of his association with her. "Laws a me, poor child. And now she has no people, no home, not a friend in the world but you?" "Not one. It's pretty sad, Miss Blair." "Sad? It's worse than that. Strikes me, though, Mr. Wansfield, you must be family and friends and all to that girl. And let a mother tell you what a noble thing you've done to give 3 years of your life to an orphan." "What I did was good for me. Better than anything I ever did before," replied Adam earnestly. "I'd go on if it were possible, but Jeannie needs a home, young people, and work to learn and live her life, and I must go back to the desert." "Ah, so that's it," exclaimed the woman, nodding. "My husband spoke just like you do. He took to the desert, sold my farm to get money to work his gold claims. Always he had to go back to the desert, and now he'll never come home again." "Yes, the desert claims many men, but I could and would sacrifice whatever the desert means to me for Jeannie's sake, if there was not a reason which makes that impossible." "And now you're hunting a home for her?" "Yes." "She's well educated, you said?" "Her mother was a school teacher." "Then she could teach children. Things work out strangely in life, don't they? My Betty might be left alone. Any girl may become an orphan." "Now, Mrs. Blair, will you be so kind as to take Jeannie or go with us into town and help us get some clothes for her? A few simple dresses and things she needs. I'd be helpless, and Jeanie knows so little. She ought to have a woman go with her." "Indeed, she shall have," declared Mrs. Blair. "I'll be only too glad to go. I need some things." Then she struck her forehead with a plump hand. "I've got a better idea. There's not much to be bought in the store at Santa Isabel, but my neighbor up the valley, his name is Hunt. He has a granddaughter. They're city folks. They've been somebody once. This granddaughter is older than Jeanie. She's more of a woman's figure, and I heard her say only the other day that she brought a lot of outgrown dresses with her and didn't know what to do with them. All her clothes are fine, not like you buy out here. I'll take Jeanie over there, right this minute." Mrs. Blair got up and began to untie her apron. Kindliness beamed upon her countenance, and she seemed to have acquired a more thoughtful eye. "You are good indeed," said Adam gratefully. "I thank you, and it will be so much nicer for Jeanie. She dreaded this matter of clothes. You can tell, Miss Hunt, I'd be glad to pay." "Shucks, she won't take your money. She's quality, I told you. And her name's not Hunt. That's her grandfather's name. I don't know what hers is, except he calls her Ruth." Ruth. The sudden mention of that name seemed to Adam like a stab. What a queer, inexplicable sensation followed it. "I'll be right out," declared Miss Blair, bustling into the house. Adam called Jeanie to him and explained what was to happen. And she grew radiant. "Oh, Wani, then I won't have to go into a town to be laughed at, and I can get dressed like a lady before he sees me again." "He? Who's that, Jeanie?" inquired Adam dryly, though he knew he could guess very well. Jeanie might have lived on the desert like a shy, lonely wild creature, but she was eternally feminine enough to bite her tongue at the slip she'd made and to blush charmingly. Then Miss Blair bustled out again in sunbonnet and shawl, and with the alacrity of excitement, she led Jeanie away through the grove of oaks toward the other end of the valley. Adam returned to camp, much relieved and pleased, yet finding suddenly that a grave, pondering mood had come upon him. In the still noon hour, when the sun was hot and the flies buzzed, Adam would surely have succumbed to drowsiness had he not been vociferously hailed by someone. He sat up to hear one of the little Blairs call, "Say, Ma wants you to eat with us." Adam lumbered up and, trying to accommodate his giant steps to those of the urchin, finally reached the house. He heard Mrs. Blair in the kitchen. Then something swift and white rushed upon Adam from somewhere. "Look!" it cried in ecstatic tones and pirouetted before his dazzled eyes. Jeanie, in a white dress with slippers, all white even to the rapt, beautiful, strangely transformed face. It was a Jeanie he could not marvel at. It was a Jeanie that he marveled at. Yet, however, her dark gold-glinting tresses were brushed and arranged, he would have known their rare rich color anywhere, and the eyes were Jeanie's, vivid like the heart of a magenta cactus flower, unutterably and terribly expressive of happiness. But all else, the girl's height and form, movement had acquired something subtly feminine. The essence of woman breathed from her. "Oh, Wani, I've a whole bundle of dresses," she cried rapturously, "and I put this on to please you." "Pleased? Dear girl, I'm full of joy for you, overcome for myself," exclaimed Adam. How in that moment he blessed the nameless spirit which had come to him in the day Jeanie's fate and future hung in the balance. What a victory for him to remember, seen now in the light of Jeanie's lovely face. Then Mrs. Blair bustled in. Easy indeed was it to see how the happiness of others affected her. "It's good we have dinner at noon," she said as she put dish after dish upon the table. "Else we'd had to do with little. Sit at table, folks. Children, you must wait. We've company. Jean, come to dinner." Adam found himself opposite Jeanie. who had suddenly seemed to lose her intensity, though not her glow. She'd softened. The fierce joy had gone. Adam, watching her, received from her presence a thrill of expectancy and realized that at least one of her sensations of the moment was being conveyed to him. Then Eugene entered. His face shone. He had wet his hair and brushed it and put on a coat. If something new and strange was happening to Jeannie, it had already happened to Eugene Blair. "Folks, help yourselves and help each other," said Miss Blair. Adam was ready for that. What a happy dinner. He ate with the relish of a desert man long used to sourdough and bacon. But he had keen ears for Mrs. Blair's chatter and eyes for Jeannie and Eugene. The mother, too, had a steady and thoughtful gaze for the young couple, and her mind was apparently upon weightier matters than her speech indicated. "Well, folks," said Mrs. Blair presently, "if you've all had enough, I'll call the children." Eugene arose with alacrity. "Let's go outdoors," he said, stealing a shy look at Jeannie. She seemed to move in a trance. And Adam went out too and found himself under the oaks. The very air was potent with the expectancy that Adam had sensed in the house. Something was about to happen. It puzzled him, yet he liked the suspense. But he was nonplussed. The young couple did not present a riddle. All the same, the instant Adam felt convinced of this, he looked at them and lost his conviction. They did present a riddle. He'd not seen any other lad and girl together for many years, but somehow he wagered to himself that if he had seen 1,000 couples, this one would stand out strikingly. Then Mrs. Blair appeared. She had the look of a woman to whom decision had come. The hospitality and the kindly interest in Jeannie, the happiness in seeing others made happy, were in abeyance to a strong, serious emotion. "Mr. Wansfeld, if you'll consent, I'll give Jeannie a home here with me," she said. "Consent? I gladly do that," he replied with strong agitation. "You are, a good woman, Mrs. Blair, and I'm overwhelmed with gladness for Jeannie, for her luck. It's so sudden, so unexpected." "Some things happen that way," she replied. "They just come about. I took to Jeannie right off. So did my boy. I asked him when we got back from our neighbors if it would not be a good idea to keep Jeannie. We are poor. It's one more to feed and clothe, but she can help. She'll teach the children. That means a great deal to me and Jean." "He would be glad," he said. "So I thought it over, and I've decided. We've your consent. Now, Jeannie, will you stay and have a home with us?" "Oh, I'll be so happy. I'll try so hard," faltered Jeannie. Excuse me. "Then it's settled. My dear girl, we'll try to make you happy," declared Mrs. Blair. And sitting beside Jeannie, she embraced her. End of chapter 27, part 3.